So good to have you join us today. You've tuned into Business Daily and I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. Let's first get started with a glimpse of the day's highlights. Oil prices continue to plunge as the OPEC meeting over the weekend fails to plug the global glut. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. Electronics giants are getting innovative, pairing up with the furniture industry to give their products enhanced designs and added convenience. These stories and more coming right up. But first, Korea's central bank has cut the country's growth outlook for this year to below 3%. Despite the trim that further stokes concerns of Korea falling into a low growth trap, the central bank left its interest rate unchanged at 1.5% for the 10th straight month. Our Hwang Jae tells us more.
The Bank of Korea expects the country's economy to expand 2.8% this year. That's a trim from its earlier projection of 3% and signals Korea may fail to grow in the 3% range for a second straight year. After the central bank's monthly monetary policy meeting on Tuesday, BOK Governor Lee Ju-yeol explained worse than expected first quarter figures prompted by sagging global demand led to the downgrade. While the new forecast fuels concerns about Korea's feeble recovery momentum, the central bank remained cautious in maneuvering the key rate, leaving it steady at a record low of 1.5%.
There are limitations in boosting the economy just through monetary policy, because the current ailing conditions are mainly due to structural issues, not cyclical factors. So monetary policy can be effective when carried out with fiscal policies and structural reforms. The board is adamant on this.
The top central banker added, although the bank does have more room to cut its rate further, current levels are accommodative enough to support the country's growth pace. The BOK projects the Korean economy will show signs of a gradual pickup this quarter on the back of improving domestic demand. Still, market expectations linger for a trim later this year as Korea faces paltry global demand, especially from China.
With the lowered revision, we think their stance of further easing in the second half of the year actually it stays the same. We continue to believe the fiscal policy, the supplementary budget will be drawn in the later of this year and the 2 rate cuts in the second half of the year as well.
So while the BOK kept a wait-and-see approach this month, raising questions about the effectiveness of a rate trim, analysts say if second quarter figures do not improve as expected, there will be little room for the central bank to wiggle out of easing pressure. Hwang Jae, Business Daily.
All eyes are on where crude prices are headed after the world's biggest oil producers failed to reach a deal to freeze oil output. And to tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you, Professor.
Happy to be here.
All right, so there were a lot of expectations over a production freeze before the OPEC meeting took place on Sunday in Doha, Qatar. Now, I guess it was no surprise that crude prices started nosediving again after they failed to reach an agreement over all this. So what's your outlook on oil prices from here on out?
Okay, well, for the first half of the year, the oil prices are probably going to fall. Now, the industry organizations and a lot of analysts believe that the oil prices may pick up in the second half of the year because of global recovery, but global recovery is such an unsure thing right now that it's basically up in the open.
Now, there were high hopes that this deal, if a deal is reached, then which has been in the making since February to stabilize output at January levels to last until October 2016. But the pact fell apart after OPEC's de facto leader, Saudi Arabia, demanded that Iran join in, but Iran was absent.
Right. In fact, it was never really clear whether Iran wanted to join this pact. Now, Iran just got freed from its sanctions because of their nuclear weapons development. So if they had frozen the level at January levels, Iran, I think, thought that it would have been at the close to sanction levels. And that would be very unfavorable for them, especially since because of the sanctions, they have not been developing their economy for a while, and their population had certain expectations that things will get better. Right. So they really needed that extra oil revenue. So it was they were never going to agree to a freeze. And it's actually kind of very strange that the meeting was held in the first place.
Now, then, aside from that, what's Iran's reaction to all this?
Okay, well, the Iran's reaction is that they will have to renegotiate. Iran is not in favor of the freeze, and it definitely wants to expand production. Now, the problem is a lot of other members also want to expand their production. Venezuela, because they're in major economic crisis right now, and then Russia, even though they did agree to a possible freeze if every other member agreed to a freeze, is engaged in two very expensive military conflicts right now in Syria and in Ukraine.
Right.
So they also need the revenue. And other oil-producing economies, they also depend a lot on oil revenues for their government expenditures. So everybody wants to have more oil revenues, and if the prices are being held so low, then they're going to have to just pump more. So there's a chicken and an egg problem here. Prices are not going to go up unless they freeze production and even lower it. On the other hand, if they lower production, at least for a while, their revenues are going to fall, and no country wants to go through that. So what we have is a situation where these problem countries want other countries to reduce production, but not themselves.
So obviously this failure to reach an agreement as well as tensions among oil-producing countries is adding, I guess, more uncertainties to the global oil industry, right?
Exactly. So we had a large fluctuation of prices just in the last couple of days after the meeting fell apart. That's partially because people were hopeful that perhaps some agreement can be reached here, so that hopefulness led to, I guess you could call it a sort of a mini bubble, and that's being popped right now. But Iran has given signals that it will increase production. Saudi Arabia has given signals that if everybody does not come to an agreement, then Saudi Arabia will possibly raise their production. So there's going to be even more of a glut possibly.
So fears are growing over how these oil producers might embark on a battle again to, I guess, gain more market share.
Yeah, that's always been a problem with cartels. So I remember in graduate school, my professor told me that it's not a question of why oil-producing countries are not getting together in cartels, but how they can get together in a cartel in the first place. Because once they establish a fairly high price for their output, every country has an incentive to cheat, to lower the prices just a little bit so they can take most of the market away from other people. And Saudi Arabia in the past have been acting as sort of a swing producer. If other countries produce more than they allotted, then Saudi Arabia will cut their production so that they could reduce the quantity supplied and keep the prices up. But I think Saudi Arabia is saying that we had enough. If you guys want to cheat, then we're going to really punish you guys by having the prices low for a long time.
All right, and there are also worries here in Korea as well that this whole failure to reach an agreement on oil output is going to worsen the situation for already struggling domestic exporting sector.
Okay, well, I think that is more due to signaling effect rather than actual economic effect. Remember, in the 1990s, we had oil prices, which in real terms were even lower than it is right now, but the economy was running great. Now, one of the reasons that the oil prices are so low right now is because demand is low, and demand is probably going to remain low for the foreseeable future. So this low oil price is a symptom rather than a cause. And I think if the global recovery takes place, then Korean exports and oil prices and oil usage will all rise together. But having the low oil prices continue right now does signal that the recovery does not seem likely at the moment. So I don't think it'll hit Korean exports directly, except in some fields like shipbuilding and construction.
Okay.
But it does give a signal that things are not likely to get better.
Then, I mean, there's another OPEC meeting scheduled for June. Do you think countries will be able to reach an agreement by then? And what's your outlook on all this from here on out?
Okay, well, unless they do agree that Iran gets a major addition to their allocation, I don't think they'll work this problem out even in June. And another problem is that a lot of analysts are looking forward to having demand increase during the summer because a lot of people take drives during the summer and that increases demand. But now it seems like perhaps the increase in supply will be even higher than increases in demand. So we don't know what's going to happen in the summer. We don't know what's going to happen afterwards. But a lot of analysts are now looking at the output of the United States, which is the largest producer, though not the largest exporter.
Right.
And their production seems to fall. So that may reduce the total output in the second half of the year, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Professor.
Thank you.
The head of the International Monetary Fund says women's contribution to the world's workforce can be a game changer for global growth. During a live Q&A session on Twitter on Monday, Christine Lagarde said Japan's GDP would be 9% higher and the GDP of India would expand by 27% with gender parity in the workforce. When asked how countries can step up global economic growth, the IMF chief suggested that they take a three-pronged approach, combining growth-friendly fiscal policies, country-tailored structural reforms, and accommodative monetary policies. As for some of the top geopolitical risks to the global economy, Lagarde cited Britain's possible exit from the European Union, the refugee crisis, and the risk of terrorism. Korea's TV producers are grappling with the double whammy, depressing global demand and growing competition from its neighbors to the west, China. In such a climate, they're looking to capitalize on the upscale market by joining forces with the furniture industry. Our Eunice Kim reports.
TV as designer furniture? Why not, says Samsung Electronics. With eyes on the high-end collector, it's hoping to redefine the tube with its Serif TV. That's Serif, the font. The TV's designers, an award-winning French brother duo, explain their first foray into consumer electronics as inspired by the letter I, which outline either end of the frame TV. Metals are practically invisible, with a piece of fabric covering up the box's ports and connectors.
When placed together with other furniture, the TV sits very naturally in the room, more so than others encased in metals or crystals.
The TV is sold exclusively in select premium furniture stores or on Samsung's website. Or consumers can have a TV built into their furniture. LG Smart Kitchen TV is a mini beam installed inside a cabinet, projecting full HD images onto the door that doubles as a screen. More than double the size of conventional kitchen TVs, LG's product can also mirror smartphones and tablets and function as a radio.
Time in the kitchen can become more rewarding, whether it be while cooking or over family meals.
These are signs of a fight to keep a lead from the world's #1 and #2 TV makers, as competitiveness in OLED or quantum dot display technologies don't look to be enough in generating demand. In fact, researcher IHS Technology projects the global market for TVs will shrink by 2% compared to last year, selling about 220 million sets. And that's a pie that Korea's giants will have to split notably with their Chinese competitors, quickly catching up in liquid crystal technology with a price tag too hard to beat. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Here in Korea, it's not hard to find people on the subway playing games on their smartphones. And because of all the things that we can do using our smartphones now, internet cafes that used to be almost everywhere here in the country are reporting dwindling numbers of customers. Therefore, less number of these cafes as well. Our Lee Joo-young has more.
Once the symbol of the vibrant online gaming culture in Korea, internet cafes, widely known as PC방, have long offered big-screen computers that come with ultra-high-speed internet access. But according to Korea Creative Cultural Agency, these cyber cafes have been rapidly declining in number throughout the country. After reaching a record high of over 23,000 back in 2001, the figure plunged to roughly 13,000 in 2014. That means 44.2% of PC방 have gone out of business over the years. Experts say this comes as more people are playing games on their mobile phones instead of on desktops. Reflective of this trend is Korea's biggest online game developer NCSoft's push for new smartphone games. It says it will release mobile versions of its top 2 online games within the year, a move likely to put a deeper dent in PC방 clientele. Easier access to Wi-Fi in most places across the country has not helped either. On top of this, various regulations like the no smoking law and the so-called shutdown rule, which bans all minors under 16 from playing computer games after midnight to 6 in the morning, have contributed to the shrinking pool of cyber cafe visitors. Experts say although the number of PC방 has been on a downward slide, the demand for computer-based gaming will not be wiped out anytime soon. They say what's key for the survival of internet cafes will be whether online game developers can bring back to life the merits of online-only gaming. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching and hope to see you right back here for your latest updates on business news that matters to you. Until then, goodbye.